so far. To be clear, I am not a mobile gamer. I spent quite a bit of time playing Monster Hunter Now when that first released, and will occasionally play it for about a month or so before getting bored and dropping it for a while, but my most played mobile game is probably Solitaire, so that should give you an idea of my typical mobile gaming experience. But, as luck would have it, I was accepted into the beta for Monster Hunter Outlanders and spent the next few weeks or so after it came out playing it off and on, and I wanted to talk about my thoughts regarding the beta experience thus far. To set the stage, Monster Hunter Outlanders has you and a group of hunters, later deemed the Storm Squad, landing at an island in search of the Aurora, or what the locals call the Lapua. This is revealed to be an elder dragon that's harvesting light from a local mineral called Radiantite to do something. I don't know, I haven't made it that far yet. This results in you searching the island, taking care of radiant monsters that have been made extra powerful because of the Radiantite, Monster Hunter gameplay loop, wonderful. The actual gameplay in Outlanders is surprisingly good for a mobile game, and I was pleasantly surprised by how each weapon controls. Different from the Monster Hunter Now control scheme of using taps and swipes to attack, Outlanders has a number of buttons that correspond to different combos and attacks for each weapon, which feels surprisingly intuitive and smooth to control. Something else that I also appreciate is the clarity that comes with how armor skills and set bonuses function, giving you exact numbers and percentages for damage increases, which is always appreciated. Combat against monsters can sometimes feel a bit one-note, which I guess is to be expected when you're watering down Monster Hunter combat into a mobile format, but for what it is, it's pretty good. In theory, we'll get to this in a bit. Outside of combat, you're also able to explore the island at your leisure, which you can do to gather materials for your standard crafting and upgrading, but Outlanders also has a number of little mini-game encounters you can participate in as well. These are okay. They help flesh out the world, but after a bit of exploring of the first and second areas of the island, I began finding repeated minigames with only some slight changes, and before I'd even seen all of the little minigames, they were already starting to feel like a chore that I have to do for their respective rewards, which we'll also get into later. Exploring is also a decent opportunity to set up different structures like zip lines, fans, or ballista to assist with traversing the island, a la Wild Hearts. Similar to my feelings about this in Wild Hearts, I don't really care for it here either. It can make hunts more efficient, but in my experience, starting a quest usually just puts you within walking distance of the monster anyway, so there's not much reason to invest in island infrastructure outside of the story quests, where you're often forced to place these structures in order to progress. There is an exception, though. I do like the auto-gatherers, well, quote-unquote auto-gatherers.
Build it near resources. The Ruticos will gather for you.
This is just slave labor, where you can place them down near resource gathering points and have them automatically sent for collection, which is a neat alternative to the farms of traditional Monster Hunter and saves you from having to spend time gathering materials when you could be taking on quests. On the topic of quests, there are a lot of different types of quests in Outlanders. You of course have access to your bog standard free hunts, where you pick a monster to kill in order to get its materials to forge new gear. These free hunts also have research criteria associated with them, which essentially serve as small side objectives for you to complete during the quest that help with progression later down the line, which we'll touch on when we get there. These are kinda cute and remind me a bit of subquests in traditional Monster Hunter, though there's not much variety to them, as they usually all involve breaking parts or using environmental traps or not getting hit by certain attacks. Outside of these free hunts, however, the rest of the quests are different, and not in a way that I'm sure I like. Instead of fighting monsters for their materials, there are a bunch of different quests to obtain unique upgrade materials. All of these quests take energy, which in typical mobile game fashion is a limited resource that resets every day, which you will very likely be able to spend real world money on to get more of and speed up the grind. And, as luck would have it, you're going to need a fuck ton of energy to upgrade everything you need, as each different quest only awards some of one specific material that upgrades one specific aspect of your character and your squad, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we open that can of worms, I want to talk about the limited time challenge and trial hunts. The limited time challenge pits you up against an elder dragon. For my time with the beta, it was Kushala, and asks you to hunt it over and over with a Hades-esque choose your omens to make the fight more difficult. Doing this over and over will earn you more of an event currency, as well as a reward called Ruticoins. Ruticoins are basically the free-to-play currency that seemingly allow you to buy some of the pay-to-win bullshit that the game has to offer, but again, we'll touch on that in a bit. The actual quest format itself reminds me a bit of something like Safi Jiva and Iceborne. It's a pretty cool concept, but it's also frustrating that you can't actually get any Elder Dragon materials for beating the quest, so no new weapons and armor, just the event currency and the Ruticoin. Lastly are those trial hunts, in which there are 100 quests that need to be completed back to back, growing more and more difficult as you get further along. Once you complete 20 quests, you're only allowed to complete 3 per day, and that's because this is the free-to-play method of obtaining something called insight and recruitment letters, and okay, enough putting it off. We need to talk about the mobile game shit. For those who are unaware, Outlanders is what's commonly described as a gacha game, similar to something like Genshin Impact, in that alongside your basic character that you create, you're also able to roll for unique characters that have additional abilities during combat, and this is where I fear Outlander starts to lose the plot a little bit. Unlike the character you create, gacha characters are locked to playing one specific weapon type and have additional abilities and skills associated with both their weapon type and weapon element that you, the player character, don't have access to, such as Enraged Guard on the Lance character Oyang Varen, or a longsword style fade slash and a vertical slam for your greatsword on Freya. Thus, if you have a weapon type you like and want to use, you are actively being limited if you're not playing a gacha character, which is already pretty fucking stupid, but that's only the start of it. Your basic character also has access to 3 different ultimate abilities that range from hitting a monster with your slinger to make it stagger easier to using a flash bomb, but your gacha characters all get unique and powerful ultimates as well, from laying a near instant pitfall trap to increasing the damage of your entire team to a guaranteed stagger that also just deals damage and lets you do instant TCSs from draw because they need you to spend fucking money or something. These ultimates fall under 3 different categories, being Assault, Disruptor, and Support, and depending on the ultimate you use, the cooldown for the next type of ultimate in the triangle gets drastically reduced, allowing you, with very little planning or preparation, to blast all of your abilities into the monster for a significant burst of damage and opportunity. To my own surprise, the concept of ultimate abilities itself isn't really an issue for me. Hunter Arts and Wirebug skills and Generations and Rise, respectively, are functionally the same. They're all powerful abilities on a cooldown that can give you an edge in a hunt. And I think one ultimate charging another encourages players to balance their team composition in unique ways, whether in multiplayer or single player. My biggest concern from this comes in how that composition becomes balanced, being, of course, the gacha mechanic itself. These characters can only be obtained through cashing in recruitment letters to roll for them, leaving both the character you get and the amount of insight you manage to roll after the fact to the hands of fate, which sucks ass on a monetary scale, where it will likely be optimal to spend real-world money on rerolls. You roll gacha to play as an objectively better hunter, and you roll gacha to play with objectively better companions, and you roll gacha to play with an objectively better palico. This is a pay-to-win system. There are methods of getting invitations without spending money, like trial quests or Rutacoins, but the fact that you will most likely be able to spend money on it, and the fact that it's random chance, and the fact that these gacha characters will always be superior to the player-created character, it's just bad. There's no way of getting around it. Also, quick side note, I say most likely able to spend money because the beta doesn't have a functioning shop to spend real money on items in-game, as none of the beta progress is transferable to the full release of the game. Thus, we can only speculate on how the monetization of the game works, so take everything I say about my concerns with monetization as just that, concerns, not hard fact. Regardless, my experience playing the beta has shown that while it's pretty easy to make significant progress early on with a non-optimal team, you are heavily encouraged to upgrade and push along at least 4 other characters, which is either going to take a lot of time or a lot of money to maintain progression and be able to beat the more difficult monsters down the line. Speaking of, let's also tackle how Outlanders balances its difficulty. Hunts in Outlanders are very quick, usually limited to about 5 minutes per hunt, though there are some exceptions, such as the marathon hunts that can go on for as long as 18 minutes. Thus, a lot of the walls you'll face playing Outlanders stems from your DPS and whether you're able to beat the clock or not. This is all well and good, but how does one get more damage? Obviously, you can craft better weapons and armor, as well as expand or change the team composition and strategy, but unlike a traditional Monster Hunter game, there's a much more powerful, and in my opinion, a much less preferable method of doing more damage. All of those random energy quests for upgraded materials, you're not upgrading your weapons and armor. Well, you are, but it's not just with monster parts, it's also with these stupid fucking upgrade orbs. Once you've upgraded your weapons and armor enough, you also need to upgrade your keepsake. What's your keepsake, you ask? It essentially serves as a direct buff to your character's passive damage, with a higher level keepsake both directly increasing your damage and defense, as well as adding passive skills to your hunter to further increase damage when certain conditions are met. This is already bridging too far out of the realm of Monster Hunter progression for me, but that's ignoring the biggest offender. The version of Hunter rank in this game, Proof of Mastery, effectively serves as the tutorial for what you should be doing and how to progress in order to face off against bigger threats. However, each time you rank up, you'll also see that you gain a percentage damage increase for your entire party. This sucks ass. I hate this. There have been plenty of times I thought I'd challenge myself to fight a high-level monster, only to realize that there's literally no feasible way to do enough damage because I'm simply not a high enough level. Monster Hunter is not and has never been a traditional RPG. There are no levels, there are no stats, it's just your skill and the equipment you forge. Having your progression gated because you haven't leveled up enough is just... it doesn't feel like Monster Hunter. Now, before I get ahead of myself, I need to address something that I somehow forgot to mention in my Monster Hunter Frontier video. In Frontier, there actually exists a very similar mechanic, something called My Missions. What this is a series of quests that you're asked to complete, ranging from killing a Velocidrome, to killing 2 Rathian, to killing a hardcore Teostra, whatever. Once you complete the required mission, you'll receive one of 4 very powerful bonuses: reduced ailment time, increased health recovery rate, increased damage reduction, and the most sought after of all, an increase to your damage cap. Yes, Frontier caps your total damage from the offset. If you were somehow able to obtain a build with skills like Solid Determination or Strong Attack 6 right at the start of G rank, you would likely not see a very large increase in damage due to this cap. Therefore, doing all these stupid ass missions is essentially a requirement for progression in Frontier. This system sucks ass, and given that there are multiple hundreds of missions needed to fully unlock these caps, it's incredibly tedious as well. The reason I bring all of this up is that Frontier has something called My Mission tickets, which you can use to skip completing missions and just increase your caps directly. How were these tickets obtained, you ask? By purchasing the Premium SR course, where you would receive 20 of them each time you purchase it. This is fucking horrific, essentially forcing you to complete over 200 random quests to do max damage or spend all of your money to skip this grind. And, unfortunately, Outlanders is looking closer and closer to falling into a similar path of progression. When working to increase your Proof of Mastery, there are a list of objectives you can complete to gain XP a lot faster. Some of these are perfectly fine, like completing the free hunt quests while also doing all the little research subquests, but then there are objectives that require you to upgrade your keepsake, or objectives that require you to upgrade multiple palicos, requiring you to spend energy to even begin working towards it. If you want to level your Proof of Mastery fast, you either need to spend a lot of time or a lot of money to speed up progression. And given that progression in the game's story is locked behind what Proof of Mastery you are, the incentive is there to speed things up. And the worst part about it all is that if you don't want to do these objectives, you can also just directly purchase experience through the store. During the beta, the currency for this was obtained by doing daily and weekly quests, but if there's an option to buy this experience with real-world money as well, then you can essentially boil this entire system into the Frontier My Mission system, but even worse, due to the time restrictions on how many energy quests you can do per day. It's just a shitty-ass system designed to make impatient players spend more money to speed it up, and I fucking hate it. But, despite my reservations with how progression and difficulty overall is laid out, there are still some interesting ideas here, like illustrations. If you're familiar with gacha games, the concept of illustrations should sound quite familiar. They essentially function as RNG stat buffs that you gain from killing monsters, and can have effects like flat or percentage increases to attack, defense, elemental damage, poison buildup, etc. You're allowed to equip up to 5 of them, but depending on their strength, denoted by whether it's a large or small monster, you might not be able to equip all 5, as stronger illustrations take more slots to use. Thus, you're encouraged to mix and match illustrations both on their inherent strength, the core effect that you can have active for only one of them, as well as the ink that they're made of. The core effect serves as an active passive bonus that rewards you for meeting a certain condition. For example, I've been rocking the Anjanath illustration that every 60 seconds gives me a bunch of extra fire damage for 30 seconds, which then becomes a nerf if I take too much damage during the buff. If you've seen my videos before, you should know that I'm a big fan of customizability and effects or skills that alter how you play the game, and almost all of these illustration core effects reward you for rocking a specific build or playstyle, which I think is really cool. The system isn't perfect, though. It still requires you to directly level up illustrations to deal more damage, and I find the ink composition system, where matching different illustrations of the same ink can give you set bonuses to do even more damage, to be a bit disappointing when compared to how the core skills function. Despite this, I get the feeling that illustrations are meant to serve as this game's talisman system. They're both RNG systems that allow you to fine-tune and perfect your build, and though this sort of system isn't entirely unique to Outlanders, I think it fits the Monster Hunter gameplay loop surprisingly well. It also helps that illustrations can be leveled up by consuming unwanted illustrations, which means that you can just grind free hunts to both gain illustrations and level them up passively, which is a breath of fresh air compared to grinding energy quests. Or at least it would be if you didn't need energy to add additional passive buffs to each respective illustration as well. It's still a pretty cool system though, and it's a grind that actually feels pretty okay in the grand scheme of things. There's one last thing I want to quickly touch on regarding combat and balance, and that's insight. Insight is fucking stupid. For gacha characters, you gain insight either from buying it directly or from rolling the same character again when doing recruitment. Or if you're not using a gacha character, you gotta do 100 fucking trial quests. With Insight, you're able to equip weapon and character-specific buffs that dramatically alter the damage you're able to do, and it's really fucking dumb. From the footage, you've probably gathered that I stuck with heavy bowgun for the majority of the game. I started off using lance, but I missed the gun side of things. After gaining enough insight, I was able to equip a passive that doubles the amount of pellets fired from spread ammo. Instead of hitting 5 shots per basic attack, now there's 10. Like, I'm effectively dealing double fucking damage just because of my insight. That means if you're using a gacha character, which you really should be doing because they're objectively better than the main hunter, constantly rolling recruitments and banking on RNG to give you the same character multiple times is an effective way to drastically increase your damage output as well. God, I fucking hate mobile games. Okay, that was a lot of negativity and worry, but I'd also be lying if I didn't see potential in Outlanders. For starters, I was pleasantly surprised by the performance of the game and found it running pretty smooth for most of my playtime. Recording gameplay while playing dropped FPS quite frequently, and there was also this one time where everything became Play-Doh and very explosive. What the fuck is happening? But it usually ran fine. I'm sure you've glanced at the funny beta text on the bottom left of the screen and know that I'm playing on a OnePlus on medium graphics. I'm using a OnePlus 15 specifically, which is a higher end phone and is able to handle the game on max graphics pretty okay. The downside is that the battery drain is pretty substantial, which is why I'm just using medium graphics instead. If you have an older phone, you're probably going to struggle to run the game, just as a heads up. There are rumors of a potential port to PC as well, but I also have no clue what that would look like, so I'm not going to comment on that. I also had quite a bit of fun playing multiplayer with other people. When you're playing solo with your gacha character squad, there's a lot of upkeep you have to do, since if you're trying to be optimal, you have to spend a lot of time and resources grinding out multiple different sets of weapons and armor, as well as upgrading the keepsakes, buddies, and illustrations of all of your companions. Multiplayer does away with this and just lets you focus on yourself, resulting in the experience feeling a lot more like a traditional Monster Hunter game, just with excessively quick hunts, and also a damage percentage counter at the end of the quest, which I feel like is just a recipe for toxicity, but it's kind of funny, so whatever. Outlanders also has some more Frontier inspiration in its guild system, where you can invite people and partake in a lot of multiplayer-focused competitions for titles and rewards, and a spot on these cool statues in the main village. Outlanders definitely feels MMO-inspired, for better and for worse, but I'm always a big fan of games encouraging hunters to team up, especially since I feel like close-knit lobbies haven't really been a thing since World added the SOS flare, and guilds seem like a good way of remedying this. I see a lot of potential with the multiplayer aspect of Outlanders, and with it presumably being a free-to-play mobile game, I think opportunities to play with friends or people you meet in-game will be a lot easier to come across. Since we're just kind of wrapping things up now, I'll also say that a lot of the voice acting and cutscenes are kind of meh, and I frequently had an issue where the subtitles and dialogue were not in line, where I'd be seeing the subtitles for the sentence after the one currently being spoken. The story didn't really interest me that much, and I skipped most of the cutscenes where this was an issue, but I figured I'd mention this here. Also, as it currently stands, I think the roster of Outlanders is kinda lackluster, only being comprised of world monsters, just like how Monster Hunter Now first launched. If they plan to expand the roster in a way similar to Now, I think Outlanders could become home to some interesting variety as well, but all we've got at the moment are the slightly altered movesets of the Radiant monsters. I could go more into depth about my speculations and whatnot, but as I've mentioned, this is just the beta, and my speculations are just that. The full extent of the game, what in-app purchases there are and how expensive they'll be, plans for future development or events, even balance changes to the current systems. All of these will only be made fully clear once the game eventually releases. For now, despite a lot of my worries about how the game will hold up over time, Outlanders is genuinely pretty fun. At its core, it's just a mobile gacha game with a worryingly high potential to be super pay to win, but it's easy to jump into and play for a bit if you're bored at work or something. Is it something I see myself playing religiously? No, not really, but like I do with Monster Hunter Now, I can see myself jumping into it for a while, then stopping, then playing it again like a month or two later. Ultimately, it's what you make of it, and for me, from what I've seen and played so far, yeah, it's fine.